really lucky for a number of reasons to have Neil Otey here today, not the least of which is that those of you who fly out of different towered airports across the country recognize what a treat we have here at Anoka, because it is a tower crew that are easy to work with. I've never felt like they're out to get me, and they don't make rude comments about my landings when I come in. So I appreciate that very much. But seriously, Neil has become the tower chief here at Anoka, and he spoke here a couple years ago for the first time, and it really helped allay the fears of a lot of people that don't like to fly into tower airports. And so with that, we asked him to come back, and he's come back again and again and again, and we're happy to have you. Thank you very much, Neil. Welcome.
Well, I'm going to have to apologize off the get-go because I'm getting older, so I'm going to have to wear glasses at some point. How many of you are from other airports other than Anoka? Where are you from? All right. Is that on? Oh, there we go. Walker. Okay. How about some of the other ones? Buffalo. Okay. Wow, all over. Good. Well, I've got an airplane over at Lake Elmo, so I fly out of Lake Elmo and here at Anoka when I can. There's some people in the audience that most of you may know, but if you don't, you should. The guy who introduced me, the Doc, he's the head of the Minnesota Pilots Association for this gathering. He's a fun guy to have on the airport. We got Waldo Anderson sitting right here. If you don't know Waldo, you haven't been around enough. Because he's been around forever. He gave me my check ride when I was getting my seaplane rating. And I was so worried about it, and it went really smooth. So I was very appreciative of that. I'm going to give you a little bit of my background as far as air traffic is concerned, just to give you a little better idea of the controllers that we have here at Anoka, and then how that maybe compares with some of the other facilities around. I started with the FAA in 1975. I worked 3 years at Minneapolis Center. I worked a year at La Crosse, Wisconsin in the flight service. I worked a year at Minneapolis Flight Service. Then the controller strike happened, and all the controllers got fired. I was in flight service at the time, so we had a different union than the controllers at the major facilities had. And so that whole thing blew by me while I was in flight service. Shortly after it happened, they asked anybody if they wanted to do any controlling, if they would be interested to just throw your name in the hat, and they would make selections out of that group. I was selected for Crystal Tower. I worked at Crystal Tower for about a year. Then I went to Minneapolis. I worked in the tower and approach control for 20 years at Minneapolis. And I got tired of working at Minneapolis. And my good buddies who were here at Anoka already, who preceded me, said, you should come up to Anoka. You'll have a good time. So when I retired from Minneapolis, I picked up all my paperwork and walked out the door, and 2 weeks later I walked in the door over here. And I've been here for, it's hard for me to believe it or not, it'll be 14 years in November. You believe that, Cheryl? It's hard for me to believe I've been here this long, but it must be going by fast because I'm having a good time. Most of our controllers, I'm trying to think of an exception, most of our controllers in the tower now followed that same path. All of our controllers were at one time at Minneapolis Approach. Several of us started in the center before going to approach control, so we have center background. In my case, I had flight service background, center background, approach control, tower at the big airport, tower at the little airport when I was at Crystal. So I'd been there before and kind of done all that. And so coming to Anoka was really a pleasure for me because I like talking to airplanes. And because when we have vacancies at Anoka, we have an opportunity of selecting people who we've worked with before at approach control. So we have the option of selecting personalities that we think will fit, controller skills that we think will fit, and that type of thing. And we've been extremely fortunate over the years, before I got here and since I've been here. We've been very fortunate over the years to have some really good staff at Anoka. So that's what my background is like, and it's very similar to the background of all the other guys up there. We got 3 Daves in the tower now. So if you say, hey Dave, when you taxi by, you got a better than 0.5% chance of getting it right. One of the things that I like to emphasize in these talks is we are here to provide a service to you, the users. We're here to help you guys. We're not cops. We don't want to enforce. We prefer to explain. Sometimes in some certain circumstances, we'll have somebody call the tower. It doesn't mean we're going to write you up because you're going to call the tower. We might want to know your phone number so we can call you later about something else, or talk to you about your airplane. But we like to work with the pilots to help them better understand how the system is designed to work for them and how they can get the most out of the system. And so my talks, when I've been here before, and my talk today, will focus on that type of philosophy. We want to be there for your safety, but we also need you to work with us in a partnership. And that partnership involves a lot of things. When you guys are operating on the field and you're taxiing out and there's something on the taxiway or something on the runway that you notice as you're taxiing out to get on the runway, we can't see a lot of that stuff. You are our eyes in a lot of cases to help us manage what's going on. And so I like to think of what we do and what you guys do as very similar, and we should work together to make it enjoyable and safe for everybody involved. Our main job is safety. But like I said, we can't do that alone. I've had so many instances of pilots saying something when they see something that doesn't look just right, in instances where it's been very helpful. That allows us to do a better job. So if you guys can help us do a better job, then we're going to try to do a better job for you in terms of the service that we provide. Anybody have a guess how many runway crossings we have in a month at Anoka? This is runway crossings other than, let's say, aircraft. I'm talking about fuel trucks, maintenance vehicles, different things like that. Any idea? 200? Okay. Anybody else? We started a survey a couple of months ago, 1st of March, and we're just about to complete the April survey. We got 2 days left. Would it surprise you to know that we've had over 1,000 runway crossings in March and April each month. This month, when I was up in the tower this afternoon before I came over here, we were above 1,030, and it was still going. We got another 2 days to go. Think about that. That's a lot of runway crossings. Fuel trucks, maintenance vehicles, that kind of stuff. That does not include airplanes taxiing. That also brings me to another point in terms of us working together on this. If you turn final and you're coming into land and you see something that doesn't look right, don't just let it go. Say something. If you see things on the runway, if you see vehicles that look like they're still on the runway and you have a clearance to land, that type of thing, say something about it. We're all in here for the same purpose, and that's to get home at night and have dinner. And with your help, we'll be much better at it than we hope that we are anyway. But it never hurts to have an extra pair of eyes. Any helicopter pilots? I was talking to one right before the seminar. There he is back there. For the helicopter pilots, when I'm standing in the control tower and I'm looking out across the field, there is a point below the tree line and above the runway where you're just virtually invisible from the tower. Once you drop below the tree line from our viewpoint, especially if you have an aircraft with a darker fuselage, and if you stay in that zone for any length of time, which a lot of times you do, hovering, doing auto rotations, that type of stuff, where you're just above the runway but not right down on the runway, it's really hard to see you in a lot of instances. If you're out there in a helicopter, those are the kind of things that we like to tell people so that they understand that that could happen. It could happen that I look out there and I scan the runway the same as I do for anything else. In the back of my mind, hopefully, I'm thinking, I know I got a helicopter out there somewhere, and I scan again and I scan again, I still don't see him. Next thing I know, I see him drop down to the runway. And he was there the whole time, but unless you really look for him, they're hard to see. If you're told to taxi onto the runway and hold in position for departure, and then a minute or so goes by and you haven't gotten a clearance yet, say something. If you're cleared for takeoff and you pull out onto the runway and there's a helicopter down at the end hovering 20 feet off the runway, say something. Those are the things that we have to work together on. As good as my eyesight is, I can't see them all the time. I know they're there somewhere, but I can't see them all the time. So whatever you can do to help us, we're grateful for that help. When it gets to arguing with us about a runway selection, then I'd say cut her off there. Funny things happen when you're a controller. One of the things that happened to me recently, I got to say, this has never happened to me before. In the tower, we do a lot of different things. Between a quarter to the hour and the hour, we have to take the weather. We have to send that out on a couple of different computers so that it gets to approach control, all the other facilities in the area. It goes out nationally off of the other computer. We have to take traffic count and do some other things like that. So we're kind of going back and forth in the tower to one computer or the next while we're talking to the airplanes, that kind of stuff. One of the things we have to do is when people come to the front door to visit, they push a button and it rings in the tower. So I was working one night and the buzzer rings for the door. And I go over and I look, and there's a figure standing in the doorway down there with a hood up over his head like this. Behind him is another bigger figure with a hood up over his head like this. And they're wearing glasses, like sunglasses. And I'm thinking, well, this ought to be interesting. I say, can I help you? And the guy goes, dude. I said, what? He goes, dude. I said, what is it that you want? He says, can we use your runway for a little bit? And I said, what are you talking about? He goes, I'm trying to buy my friend's car, but I said, I need a place where I can really open her up. And he says, it'll only take a second. Can we just use your runway? So I tried to judiciously tell him that we can't use runways for people racing their cars around. But dude, it'll only take a second. You know when that happened? About 3 weeks ago. So that's some of the funny stuff that we get to deal with. Yeah, it was nice of him to ask. He didn't seem real happy with my answer, but he seemed to like asking. So about 15 minutes later, I look over my shoulder, and there's a car backing up to the fence at Twin Cities, right in the corner there, where the fence makes the turn, and it sits there. And then I think I hear, sure enough, it's that kid. So within a few seconds, the wheels squeal and the smoke comes out of the wheel wells, and shoo, they go down Airport Road, down past Cargill Hangar and down past Cirrus, and then I never saw them after that. So they got what they wanted anyway, despite me. But anyway, funny things happen like that, and it's good to kind of keep a sense of humor. We still have to go by some rules, but it's good to have a sense of humor. Let's talk about airspace. This is one of my pet peeves. First of all, I was listening to Steve Tebow in the tent about a half an hour ago, and he was talking about this airspace and that airspace and A airspace and B airspace and D airspace and all the different stuff like that. It's all kind of confusing. But there's a reason for having all those different kinds of airspaces. One of the most important reasons is to protect guys like you and me from big jets. One of the things that we have the Class Delta airspace for is so that jet traffic and higher speed traffic coming in and out of Minneapolis are restricted above that airspace to allow room for us little guys to operate until we can get out away from the major population areas and go on with what we're doing. But I see so many times aircraft come down the river from the northwest, from Elk River, and they'll fly right down along the river, and they'll go right around this way, and they're not talking to me, but they're going right around the edge of my airspace, and they'll come right around the edge like that, and then they'll go this way. Or they'll climb off of the airport, and they'll climb up, and the overlying airspace above is 4,000 feet. They'll go up to 3,900, 50, 60, 70, and they'll go right underneath the airspace out until they get a ways out, and then they'll go on with what they're doing. Technically, they're in the right. But from a practical standpoint and from a safety standpoint, it's not a real smart move. Because approach control can have a guy at 4,000 feet, 100 feet above you, and other than issuing traffic to a VFR target, they don't have an obligation to separate that IFR traffic from you because they don't know who you are. All they do is issue traffic. So the airspace is there to protect you. And rather than try to figure out a way to come as close to it as you can possibly come without getting into it, use it for what it's worth. You know, you guys all pay taxes, I know you do. And we all pay a lot of taxes. That airspace is your tax money. Use it to your advantage rather than looking at it as something that you can try to weasel your way around and still be legal. Because it's there for a very good reason, and it's there more to protect you little guys than it is to protect the big guys. And throw on top of that all the wake turbulence issues and stuff like that that there are with some of the bigger aircraft. I was flying over St. Paul early in my flying career. Seems like a long time ago. And I had a guard helicopter fly across in front of me on the final. I was landing runway 14. And, you know, he was maybe across the final, maybe a half a mile ahead of me. And I get down to about 200 feet on the final, and my airplane went just like this. So fast, I could hardly react. And it was from prop wash from the helicopter. So that's a very real thing. And that's things that you need to kind of put in the back of your mind when you see things occurring around you that you need to react to up here. You need to keep those kinds of things in mind because any one of those things can cause major problems for you. Traffic pattern. In the traffic patterns at ANOCA, we expect you to be at the appropriate altitudes for your type aircraft. When we clear you for takeoff, if you're going to leave the pattern, we'd like to know about that ahead of time. And if you do leave the pattern and there's other people staying in the patterns, we'll normally explain to you the traffic departing ahead will be in left closed traffic, left turn northbound approved. In that case, we're telling you that the guy's going to stay close to the field. We kind of expect you to go out and around. And then once you're clear, then you can go on course. The other thing that's important is the altitudes in the pattern. Faster, higher performance aircraft are a little bit higher than the slower aircraft for a reason. That's for protection. Make sure that you're at the proper altitude in the pattern where you're supposed to be. I had a situation, it's been several years ago now. One of the guys from Fox Hollow came out in the Sea Fury. And he wanted to just orbit the field for a while and warm it up, and then he went off someplace else. So he was up above the field at 2,500 feet going around in circles. And it started getting a little busy. I had 2 or 3 in the pattern, and then 2 or 3 more coming in, and then I issued a clearance, and I had a couple guys taxiing out, and you know, there was stuff going on. Cleared a guy for takeoff on runway 9, right turn westbound, and I go back to working, and he takes off, and I get the next guy in and put the next guy in position, and I'm going through the whole process you guys are familiar with. Next thing I know, I look over my shoulder, and I see this guy with about a 30-degree deck angle in the climb, just like this. And he's already through the pattern altitude, going for the sun. And I look over my shoulder, and here comes this Sea Fury from up north at about 240 miles an hour. And that guy just about got sucked right out of the sky. Before I could even open my mouth, it happened just like that. Stay at your altitudes, stay in an appropriate sized pattern, then we know what to expect from you. When you do something like that, or if you want to do something like that, just tell us. Tell us, can I get an unrestricted climb to the north? Or can I get an early turn? You know, if I get out at night and I'm going home and the winds are out of the west at 20, I'm going to have to go down to 27 and take off headed away from Lake Elmo. I'm going to want an early turn. If you ask, can we make an early turn? Fine. As long as we know about it, then we know how to go about protecting you. Keep us, remember, we're supposed to be partners in this. Keep us informed of anything that you want to do that you would consider like a special request. Can I go up and orbit the field for a little bit and let my oil pressure get up? Yeah, that's fine. I need to warm it up so I can do an oil change. That's fine. Can I do a high-speed taxi? I just put new brake pads in. Sure, not a problem. Just let us know what you want to do and we can accommodate you. The helicopter traffic, a lot of times they're doing regular pattern traffic and then they'll want to do auto rotations. That, if they're in the pattern with everybody else, that can create a big issue because you see them on the downwind and 10 seconds later they're banking in over the runway. So you have, as a controller, you have to make allowances for that, and you either have to get people off the runway ahead of them or do something to accommodate the fact that they're going to be from downwind to the runway in like 15 seconds. If you need to pull out on the runway and wait for 20 seconds before you take off, maybe it's a new student or something, they want to pull out on the runway and just sit there for a second and get everything organized before they go, fine. We'd like to have a few extra seconds on the runway before taking off. No problem. But just let us know, keep us in the loop so that we don't have somebody bending in from the base onto the final and you're sitting there going through the motions. When you land, turn off the runway, please go to the hold bars and beyond. If your tail is sitting out over those hold bars and the next guy's coming in, we got to send him around unless you get across those hold bars. Make sure you're across the hold bars before you stop and do whatever it is you're going to do. From a long time ago, I've always had the habit of, if I'm coming into Anoka, I check the ATIS way out so that I got the ATIS code. As soon as I'm done checking that, I got the tower frequency tuned in on one radio. As soon as I get the ATIS, I go immediately to the other radio and tune in ground control. Now that's all done. When I get off the runway, when I land and turn off the runway, all I got to do is reach down and hit the switch to the other radio, and I'm on ground. Instead of landing, pulling off the runway, and then you're sitting there, what was that frequency again? And then you're down there trying to dial in the frequencies. Plan ahead. Okay? Another thing that is very helpful for us and for you is awareness. Awareness of not only what you're doing, but as you become better and better pilots, your area of awareness will gradually get larger and larger. And when you enter a pattern and you're hearing the controller talk to 3 or 4 other aircraft also in the pattern, the light goes on and says, I'm going to start looking around here a little bit. Try to be aware of what's going on around you outside of the cockpit. We know that you're flying the airplane, and inexperienced pilots, it's going to take them a little longer to develop that awareness. But we need you to have awareness of what's going on around you in addition to whatever awareness that you're using inside the cockpit to fly the airplane. Okay? So think about that when you fly. Generally speaking, we're going to use left traffic most of the time. There are a lot of occasions when we specify right traffic. If we clear you for takeoff and we don't say left or right traffic and you're staying in the pattern, what do? Left traffic, right? Okay. If you're in the pattern for a while and I want to change you to right traffic, I'll tell you that. If I don't tell you anything and you've been in left traffic, you just stay in left traffic. If you need a different traffic pattern, if you need a larger traffic pattern, just ask us. Then we can do things to accommodate that. A lot of times it's hard to have a Cirrus following a helicopter. So we have options for doing that. We can take the helicopter and take him way up to the north end of the field and he can practice all day long on Alpha 5 taxiway, and we can run 927 all day long and never affect him at all. That way you don't have to follow him. There are things we can do. If we know that you have special requests, we can accommodate those. Just let us know what you want to do. And please understand too that we're not always going to be able to accommodate that right then. If you make a request and you're in the pattern, and then we say, no, we can't do that right now. Then you go up north to the practice area. It might be that when you come back from the practice area, I'm going to think, oh yeah, he's the one that wanted short approaches. So when you come back in, if I'm sharp that day, I'll remember that, and I'll say, would you like your short approaches now? And then we can eventually get what you want to do mixed in with what we have to do. So those are kind of things that we try to do. I was explaining to somebody earlier, if we're advertising 3.6 and the wind's 0.40 at 12, if you're in Fox Hollow and you call me and you're departing to the east, you think I'm going to run him down to 3.6 for that? Probably not. I'm going to give him 9. He's right there. Why make him drive halfway around the field? He's going to have a wind that's off the nose in one direction or the other anyway, and it saves him a lot of taxiing time. Sometimes, and we do that a lot for runway requests, sometimes it just doesn't work out because we got other traffic that won't allow us to do that. So think about those things. That pretty much covers that. Unrestricted climb, short approaches, different kinds of things that you want to do. How many are instrument pilots? Oh, good. A lot of them. How many do practice approaches around Anoka on a regular basis? Okay. When you come out and you're taxiing out and you want to do practice approaches, what's involved in the tower is we have to walk over to a computer. We have to type in your call sign and your type aircraft and the flight plan, just as if you were given a flight plan to flight service. We type that in, hit enter, and then we wait for the printer to print out the flight plan, and that gives us your code, your transponder code. We would rather, when you call us initially to taxi, that you tell us that than by taxiing to the active runway and sitting in the run-up area, and then right before you're ready to go, then you call us and say, oh yeah, by the way, we want to do practice approaches. If you do it the second of those options, then I've got to get something for you right now. If you do it when you start your taxi, then I've got a little bit of time to work it in with taking the weather, answering the dude at the door, doing other things like that, you know. A lot of times there's many things that we're doing at the same time. If you give us a little more time to work in your special requests and stuff like that, then in almost all the cases, we're able to help you out with it. And if not, if you just think of it when you're sitting there, you know, we'll get it for you. We might not be able to get it for you right away. One of the other things that it's nice to have these little face-to-face talky things about is frequency congestion. When I first came to Anoka, we had 8 people. And then there was 7. And then there was 6. Now there's 5. So right now, there are no prospects at this point of getting more than 5 controllers. And so it's not going to get, the frequency congestion is not going to get any better. And hopefully we'll be able to make it so that it doesn't get any worse. But there are times during the day where one controller is working more than one frequency. There are times of the day when we're only going to have one controller in the tower. He's doing the weather, he's doing the flight plans, he's doing pilot reports, he's doing clearance delivery, he's cutting the ATIS, he's talking on ground control, and he's talking on local. He's issuing IFR clearance, waiting on the readbacks, calling approach control for releases. That's busy. Please be patient with us when you call for taxi if we don't get back to you right away. If you hear us talking to other airplanes, they probably called a few seconds before you did, and we'll eventually get to you. If you sit there and everything goes quiet for a few minutes and you're still sitting there, then it might have been that we forgot about you. Then it's appropriate to say, 208 Sarah Pop, request taxi for 36, and then it'll remind us. But the other thing is, if I issue a clearance to an IFR aircraft and it takes me 10 seconds to issue the clearance, it's going to take him 10 seconds to read that back. Unless you hear me, even if you don't hear me, or even if you don't hear the other aircraft, if I issue an IFR clearance that takes 10 seconds, and I don't say to him, stand by on the readback, that means he's going to start reading that back. And I can talk just as fast as he can. So it's going to take 10 seconds for him to read it back. In the meantime, frequently, you'll have 3 guys jump in on ground control waiting to taxi, or the fuel truck waiting to cross the runway, or something like that. Be patient. This gets into the awareness thing too, awareness outside of the cockpit. Be aware of the frequency congestion that's occurring. If you hear me clear a guy to taxi and you're on the tower frequency, well, you know I'm at least working 2 frequencies right there. If you hear me issue an IFR clearance, now you know I'm on 3 frequencies and doing all those other things. So please be patient with us. We might not be able to get to you right away, but we're also not offended if you have to say, you know, we're waiting to cross 36 on Alpha 1, how's it looking, or something like that. You know, like we've been here, my next student's waiting, or something like that. So try to be patient with us. Try to be judicious in your comments on the frequency. The other thing, I want to say one more thing about airspace. Go ahead, Waldo.
Do you, when you're working alone in the tower, unless I got 2 transmitters and I got one on tower and one on ground, do you talk on both frequencies at the same time?
Yeah.
You do?
All 3. If I'm in the tower at night, for example, and it's just me,
Okay.
You're talking on ground control, you're talking on local, and you're talking on clearance delivery, all the same. Yeah.
So you got them all on?
All on the same, all going in one ear and out this other one. Hopefully not out the other one.
Well, I was going to say, because that's, otherwise if you don't monitor, you'd be monitoring the frequency on the other one if you didn't just talk on ground and you're working tower too.
Yeah, it'd be, yeah. It would be impossible to be switching back and forth. So you're pretty much stuck with just listening to everything and talking on everything.
Neil, I know you just mentioned clearance, but you technically have a published clearance frequency.
Yep.
Not many people use. I mean, I never use it.
I would say,
Does that cause more issues for you when you've got potentially 3 people in your head?
you know, it's about 6 of one, half dozen of the other, to be honest with you.
I mean, I know the strangers kind of use it.
A lot of the strangers use it because they read it off their airport information.
Local people just always.
A lot of the local people just call you on ground. And to be honest, if there's 2 guys in a tower, one of them's going to be working the tower frequency, the other one's going to be working ground and clearance delivery. So you're going to be talking to the same guy either way, even at whether we got 1 or 2 guys in the tower. If you're calling for a clearance on either frequency, it doesn't.
I mean, I've never been yelled at saying,
No, it doesn't matter to us. Yeah, I mean, if it got really bad, I suppose we could just put on the ATIS, call for clearances on ground control.
Yeah, that's what most of the towers, well,
You know.
Class C towers generally.
So, I mean, that's one of our options to cut down on frequency congestion. We could just put on the ATIS, call for all your clearances on ground control frequency. The thing I was going to mention before, this kind of relates to airspace, and that is practice approaches. If you're going to do practice approaches for your own benefit and for ours also, please use approach control to vector you out, put you on the approaches, because they're providing service for you that you're not going to get if you do that on your own. I can't tell you how many times I have people check on 15 miles west. We're coming in on the RNAV approach, and I look out there, and there's airplanes all over the place around Gopher. You got sightseeing at the Coon Rapids Dam. You got the pumpkin thing up there on the Highway 169 that you fly over, the corn maze thing. You got that going on, people seeing that. You've got, does anybody know how many approaches go over Gopher, just offhand? Buffalo, Maple Lake, Crystal, Anoka. All those approaches, and they all go to the same spot at the same altitude. So please use approach control services for your own health. The other thing that happens frequently, I'll get a guy calling, we're 12 miles east, we want to fly the approach in. Did you talk to approach control? No, we just want to fly it in on our own. Okay, fine. So he's flying it in on his own. Next thing you know, Falcon 1 Hotel Sierra comes in from the east, and he's running you down from behind, and he's got a speed advantage of about 150 knots on you. And something's got to give. Either you get run over or I pull him out, or I tell you, you got to go somewhere else for a second because this guy's going to run you over if I don't move you. If you are talking to approach control, they would have worked it so that either the Falcon got in ahead of you or they put the Falcon far enough behind you that it would have given you a reasonable chance to make the approach you want to make, do your practice, and then if I have to tell you if you do approach that starts out 12 miles east, and when you get down to 1.5 miles, I have you start your missed approach instead of right at the runway, you miss out on 1.5 miles. But if nobody knows you're there, and you got a jet coming in behind you, and all of a sudden you call me 5 east, and I got a jet that's 7 east, you're going to have to go around anyway, go someplace else and come in behind them. But from a safety standpoint, remember, approach control doesn't provide separation service between IFR aircraft that they're working and VFR targets. They just point out the traffic, that's it. Now, the Falcons, the faster stuff, they're going to have TCAS. The Guard helicopters, TCAS. The Air Care helicopters doing medical flights, they've all got TCAS, fortunately. So there are some things that can save your bacon in an instance like that. But if you call approach control, you know what kind of service they provide you if you call them? If you want to do an ILS approach and you call approach control, just VFR, what kind of service are you being afforded while you're on that approach? Huh? Okay.
And VFR.
And VFR. You're being provided, even if you're VFR, you're being provided full IFR services for that approach. You have to be protected from the time they turn you onto the approach until you hit the missed approach point and pull off of the approach. You're being afforded full IFR protection just like you're an IFR aircraft, even if you're doing it VFR. That's another reason. You're paying the money, you're paying taxes for all this stuff, guys. Use it. Use it to your advantage. There might be some times when you don't want to use it. But when you can, use it to your advantage because you're paying for it.
They give you a discrete code at that time.
Yes. If you call approach and they give you a discrete code and they're vectoring you for an approach, they're protecting you from other IFR and VFR traffic. That's right. Same as for IFR.
If it's VFR?
Yep. Same. While you're on that approach, you're being afforded IFR services until you get to the missed approach point and break off the approach. If you're flying a published missed approach to Gopher off the ILS, you're being afforded IFR separation on the approach and on the missed approach because it's published. And it doesn't have a missed approach point where you turn off of the approach, where you break off of the approach.
In VFR, don't they have 500-foot separation?
Well,
Versus 1,000 if it's IFR?
yeah, but you got to remember, VFR is more like an advisory service to approach control than anything else. They don't really separate you from anything except IFR aircraft and other VFR aircraft that they're working. Then they got to separate you. But the separation standards from between two VFR aircraft, if that's what you're asking, that's a little bit less.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, get in the habit of using approach control services because those guys need to practice. I guess that's about what I have to say. Let me summarize quick and then I'll open it up to questions. Remember to advise us early if you need a code. We're happy to get you one. In almost every case, we'll be able to get you one. Now the option, let's say you call on a Friday night and we're just busy as can be and we're too busy to get you a code. Your option is to depart VFR, go out to where there's plenty of room, and then just call approach. Amps approach control, Cessna 170 Golf Alpha, we're at 2,500 feet over White Bear Lake. Request a code for IFR or for practice approaches. They'll give you a code. They'll do the same thing that we would have done from you off the ground, but it allows you to get away from the airport and the congestion before you call them so that then they'll be able to help you right away. If you call them and you're mixed in with a mass of a whole bunch of other stuff, they're probably going to tell you unable or check back with me later or something. So that's your option if you don't get a code from us. But it'll go way smoother for you if you just get a code from us. And we're happy to do that for you.
What if you get a code from them, all of a sudden, they get that, you hear from them that you got a practice approach, you got one guy in the tower, and a whole bunch of traffic. At that point, you might not be able to accommodate that.
Well, but IFR traffic or practice approach traffic has priority over just other VFR stuff. There's other things we can do. You know, there may come a point in time where we have to say, this is going to be a full stop this time. We just got too many aircraft in the pattern. This is going to be a full stop.
Or isn't it once in a while you notice, even on the ATIS, that you don't have time for a practice approach?
Well, no, we don't. I can't envision that happening. It would probably affect the VFR aircraft, probably pattern traffic first, and then if it goes beyond that, you know, we might have to look at doing something else, but we're not going to turn down approaches. We're not going to turn down commercial aircraft on IFR approaches or anything like that. So that's about what I have for you. Go ahead.
You mentioned altitude appropriate depending on speed. Can you clarify that a little bit more?
Well, yeah, if you're a single engine and your speed is, if you're a Cessna 172, you're supposed to be at pattern altitude for that traffic. If you're in a Malibu and you're doing 250 knots, or a big turbo aircraft or a King Air or something, they normally are 500 feet above you if you're the Cessna.
I thought all traffic was 1,000 feet, but that's not true.
No, high performance traffic is 500 feet above the regular pattern. So that's all I meant by that. If you're a little guy and you're going slow, you're going to be at pattern traffic, pattern altitude. And then the turbos, the Pilatus, the King Airs, you know, all those guys are going to be 500 feet above you. Yeah.
I know you've alluded to it a little bit, but when us non-tower guys come down here to Big C, do you have any pet peeves you'd like to share, or other than make sure we know what we're doing before we show up?
Well, it's pretty easy for us. It's pretty easy for us to tell if there's a real inexperienced pilot on the frequency. I gotta say though, here at Anoka, we so seldom run into people that are just really inexperienced to the point where you have to, you know, do something special just to accommodate what they need to do. And there's ways to accommodate everything. You may get into some, you may get, you know, I've had to tell aircraft that are coming from the north to cross over the airport midfield, headed south, and then to put them in the pattern south of the field, just because the patterns balance out better that way or something. You know, sometimes maybe I need to delay them for like 30 seconds, and then they'll fit right in behind the guy that they're going to follow. But I can't turn him in right on the guy like this, so I let him go across the field, turn in. Now they're like this, and I turn him in first, him in second, and they're separated just like that. So as far as inexperienced pilots, we so seldom get that type of thing that it won't be an issue. And the best thing you can do for anybody who has students is to, I'm assuming you guys are all pretty experienced pilot, is to tell them, if you don't understand anything, ask. If you want a special request, ask. You know, that goes back to the partnership thing. You know, we're kind of trying to work together with each other. And the more we know about what you want to do and how you want to do it, the better off we are. And like I say, we can't always accommodate you every time, but most of the time we'll get it done. Any other questions? Come visit the tower, dude. No. You guys are the best. Thank you for everything you do.